Hey, this is Scott, and today we're going to take a look at the image quality of the Laowa 105mm f2 STF lens and compare it to the 135mm and 85 1.2 from Canon. If this is your first time to this channel, thanks for watching. Be sure to check out my other videos and subscribe if you want to see more in the future. Thank you to Laowa for sending me this lens to review. Of course, this is going to be my own opinion, but you will see the image quality for yourself today, so you can make your own judgments. But I personally am really enjoying this lens. I also want to say thank you to Okikame Camera Rental Shop in Okinawa for letting me use this lens to review. They're very, very nice people. They have reasonable rates, and they have a good selection of Canon and Sony lenses and camera bodies available, so be sure to check them out. I'll put the link on screen now and also in the description below. There is of course a difference in price, especially when you look at the 85 1.2, but in terms of these two lenses, a lot of the difference is going to come down to autofocus. So do you think that the different quality of the autofocus areas that the Laowa gives is important enough to cause you to buy it over the Canon? And on top of that, is the experience of using manual focus actually a more enjoyable experience than using the autofocus on the 135? Is that something that is actually an attractive feature to you? Just let me know all of your thoughts and comments down below. I'd love to hear from you. With that, let's get into the images. Since most people will be comparing these lenses by the quality of their bokeh, let's take a look at that first. These are just some Christmas lights, all shot from the same distance. Due to the focal length and aperture differences, the size of the bokeh obviously differs, but if you look at the Laowa, you can see a slight fall off towards the outside of the bokeh balls. I will say right up front that this is much more visible in real-world use, which we will take a look at in a minute. The 85 also tends to kind of cut off the bokeh balls towards the top and bottom of the frame. Taking a quick look at the shape of these bokeh balls when the lenses are stopped down, you can see that the Laowa remains the roundest, although the soft fall off you get wide open is not quite as apparent. The inside of all of these bokeh balls is quite nice and even to my eye at least, and especially the 135. Since these are all really great as portrait lenses, let's just check out how they look, especially the out of focus areas with some portraits. Before getting too far into it, I will say that the difference between these lenses seems to really depend on the distance to your subject and the distance to the background. The Laowa is obviously not always the most blurry because of the focal length and compression differences with the 135 and also the aperture of the 85, but it is constantly smooth. So just as I said, looking at these shots, you can see that while the out of focus areas on the 85 seem to be more out of focus, the background of the Laowa is definitely less clearly defined. In this case, the 135 falls somewhere in the middle for me. This next shot didn't show as much of a significant difference for me, although the Laowa's background does remain very smooth. I'll let you be the judge. This next shot is more of the same in that regard, although you can see the bright backlighting causes a loss of contrast with the Laowa quite noticeably compared to the two Canon lenses. We'll get more into this later, but I felt it was pretty much the only area that the Laowa was a bit disappointing. Finally, this shot shows how the difference in compression can have quite an effect on the background. And while some, including myself, may love the look of the two Canon lenses, the smoothness of the Laowa is really quite nice. Personally, in this shot, the Laowa is by far my favorite. Next up, we'll just look at a few more comparisons in terms of bokeh between the Laowa and Canon 135mm specifically. Here, the difference at 100% isn't quite so apparent, but when you back out, the background of the 135 looks noticeably busier to me when compared to the Laowa. That's not to say that it isn't beautiful, but the smoothness of the Laowa is really attractive. The difference is visible on the edge of the autofocus flowers as well. In this image, I just want to take a quick look at these branches on the side here. These are kind of difficult for any lens, but I don't see a huge difference in this case. If anything, the Laowa is once again a bit smoother in some areas, but I think it's pretty trivial. For this shot, I will let you be the judge. This photo showed one of the biggest differences for me. The bokeh in the top half, as well as the out of focus leaves on the bottom, are much less busy on the Laowa side. Viewed on its own, the 135 is still quite a beautiful image, but side by side with the Laowa, it's worlds apart. This is also a good example of the Laowa's sharpness side by side with the already very sharp Canon 135mm. Without much in the background of the photo, the difference is merely up to their focal lengths and fields of view, but again you can see how awesomely sharp these both are. In this portrait of my son pretending he's a sad Power Ranger, The compression of the 135 is a bit more appealing to me personally, although the Laowa is still undoubtedly smooth. This is one of those cases where the distance to the background is going to play a more significant role as the compression gets more noticeable. Finally, I think this shot of some loquats, or biwa as they're called in Japanese, shows one of the clearest examples of Laowa's smooth trans focus. The background of the Laowa is much less distracting and much more desirable in this case. Again, that's just my opinion, but you can see for yourself how it looks. Okay, so we made it past the bokeh. Let's take a look at how these lenses compare otherwise. The vignette isn't much of a concern on any of these lenses for me personally in the way that I use them and the look that I usually go for. But when you look at the 85mm wide open, you can see there is a moderate amount of vignette. It clears up pretty well by f2 and seems to be totally gone by f2.8. The vignette wide open on the 105mm seems to reach a bit further into the frame, and it gradually lightens up with a little bit remaining in the corner at f4, and then it seems to be cleared up at f5.6. The vignette on the 135 seems to be nearly the same, possibly lightening up a little bit sooner. Flare can be a bit subjective, but undoubtedly I think this is the one area where the Laowa does not shine. While the overall hazy effect is similar to the 135, the Laowa also loses quite a lot of contrast, looking really dull and bland compared to the two Canon lenses when facing anywhere near the sun's general direction, even sometimes with a lens hood. On top of that, at certain angles you can see quite large circular artifacts. While the 85mm does absolutely show strong ghosting effects, it lends itself to the artistic appearance in my personal opinion, but the Laowa is just distracting. Again, just to mention that I felt this was probably the only area where the Laowa fell behind the two other lenses. When it comes to chromatic aberration, the 85mm is by far the worst, especially in front of and behind the plane of focus. In most situations, you probably won't notice any chromatic aberration on the 135mm, but I've yet to see even the slightest bit with the Laowa. It really is quite impressive in this regard. Close focus on the 85mm is 0.95 meters, but 0.9 on the 105 and 135. That combined with the focal length means a noticeably smaller reproduction ratio. All three of these lenses can be very sharp, and it's hard to say which is the sharpest in real use. If I had to choose a winner though, it would probably be the Laowa. Do keep in mind though that this was not an overly controlled test. The bottom line is that these are all sharp enough that you shouldn't let it be a factor in deciding which to choose. Now let's just take a quick look at some more shots that I've taken with the Laowa 105 over these past few weeks. So you heard a little bit about what I think of these lenses and how they compare, but again, I want to hear from you. What do you think and why do you think so? Be sure to tell me in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. If you have any other questions about these lenses, leave that in the comments below as well. I will definitely get back to you. Give me a thumbs up if you found this video helpful, subscribe if you want to see more in the future, and as always, thank you for watching.